Bill Belichick, not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Even I'd love to take a shot at the contrarian view on this, but that's going to be pretty hard to do. We'll get to that. I promise you. I've got a guest coming on at 12 noon. Gary Myers is an NFL Hall of Fame voter. He's also been one of the longtime, outstanding NFL reporters. Covered the Giants, covered the NFC East, covered the league, wrote a book about the Parcells Giants teams of the 80s. Gary Myers will be my guest at noon. He did vote, according to his Twitter account, for Bill Belichick for this year's Hall of Fame class. Max is back. Charch is going to join us in about 35 minutes to talk about Daronte Jones. I've mentioned this many times before when Paul Charchian's been on with us. He's a huge Vikings guy. He'll join us at 10:35, and we may have another guest or two. We'll talk about the hiring of Daronte Jones more today and what it might mean for number 7 overall in the draft. But indulge me, if you will, and I apologize, I guess, because I just read this before the show started, and I'd like to kind of respond to it. Tim Z in Annapolis writes, "Don't take this the wrong way." I love when, no offense, don't take this the wrong way. But my God, do you kiss up to Maryland coaches? How many of them do you play golf with? So now Buzz is your latest cause? He's a lost cause, Kevin. Worst hire in Maryland basketball history. Talk about square peg, round hole. They are much better off cutting their losses now and hiring Tony Skinn, who they should have hired last spring. Rodney Rice and several others would have stayed had Tony Skinn been hired, and the team would be miles better than this hot garbage we're watching. Bring the same level of objectivity to your alma mater that you do with every other team in town. Tim, I will make sure that you understand that not everybody believes that I bring a level of objectivity to every other team in town. And Maryland fans have actually killed me in the past for being overly negative at times, but probably not so much in recent years. That's true. Yeah, I really liked Kevin Willard. I really liked Mark Turgeon. And I'm not talking about personally. Have I played golf with some of those guys? Yeah, they're hardly best friends. That's not how I would describe the relationship. No, they're not. I've known Maryland basketball coaches over the years. I love Maryland basketball. It's a passion of mine. I hate that they're not good this year. Last year was so much fun until the very end. And yeah, there's like this ritual with the sports calendar where, after football season is over, it's like, all right, I can really, sink my teeth into college basketball, and I've got a team that's going to be a tournament team. And look, Maryland's been a tournament team a lot more than they haven't over the last, several decades. But this is one of those years they're not going to be. They legitimately are awful. This will be, as I said the other day, Tim, the worst team in my lifetime of rooting for Maryland basketball. There were a couple of teams that, Gary had post-probation that weren't on TV, docked scholarships, all of those things. Walt Williams fortunately stayed, borderline saved the program in the moment for sure. Put together the longest streak of 30-point-plus games in ACC history. And they were competitive. I mean, they had some big wins. They upset some ranked teams, but they did end up with a losing record one of those seasons. And they weren't, going to go to the NCAA tournament, but those teams were much better than this team. This is the worst team of my lifetime. When you go back to Maryland basketball and really the beginning of it becoming important to college basketball, to the area, and that was when Lefty Driesell arrived in 1969 and turned Maryland into a top 10 program in the 1970s. They were a top 20-ish program in the 1980s and 1990s back into the 2000s, back towards that kind of top 10, top 15 program territory. They've never been out of the consciousness of college basketball, people. Everybody's always understood what Maryland is. Maryland's always been, even when they've been down for a year or two, winning records, but maybe not making the tournament, they've always understood how close they could be to becoming something. And it's the tradition, it's the arena, it's the conference, now the Big Ten, but it's also the area in which it is the number one recruiting hotbed in America, which, by the way, Buzz Williams has recruited pretty well so far. So, look, Tim got upset that I said Maryland fans should be patient. I said it the other day. There is a lot of angst. Maryland basketball fans are passionate, man. For those of you who don't know it, I've talked about it for years. It is right up there with what the Skins fan base has been, what the Caps fan base has been. Just super, super passionate, but they're also incredibly, incredibly impatient and difficult. Look, I should know. I've been a part of this fan base my entire life. It's a mix of Baltimore and D.C. You know, it's two big markets that support Maryland basketball. It's also an alum base that has a significant percentage of New York and Philly in it. And we know those sports fans and their passion for their alma mater as well. So it's a tough fan base. It's always been a very demanding fan base. That's what I love about it more than anything else. But it is impatient, very impatient, and it's being impatient right now from what I can tell in my interactions with a lot of my friends who are Maryland basketball fans. I mean, look, Gary Williams went to 7 straight NCAA tournaments and 4 Sweet 16s. And when they lost to Florida State at home in 2001, after 7 straight NCAA tournament appearances and 4 of those 7 being in the Sweet 16, he got booed off the floor after losing to Florida State at home in a game in early February. A month and a half later, 2 months later, the Terps were in the Final Four. A year and 2 months later, they were national champions. Gary Williams, after all of that success, people wanted him gone. I'll never forget that night. Gary will never forget that night. The pressure was on. Sweet 16s weren't good enough. And by the way, they're not good enough. We've won a national championship. We've been to 2 Final Fours. But, Tim, I know what I'm watching right now. I know what I'm watching. It has nothing to do with any sort of kissing up to Buzz Williams. I've had Buzz on the show, I think, one time. I've met him one other time. Okay? I don't have a predisposed feel for whether or not I think Buzz Williams is going to be a good coach or not. I was skeptical when they hired him. I was skeptical because I'm like, do we really want a guy that basically comes to a place, stays for a few years, wins a little bit, doesn't win big, but wins enough, and then leaves? No, I didn't think we wanted that. But I also recognize Buzz has won everywhere he's been. And stylistically, you're right. It may be a bit of a square peg, round hole situation for a lot of Maryland fans. For me, I don't care as long as he wins. But I know what I'm watching. He got here late. He had no players. He scrambled to put together a 15-player roster from scratch to try to resemble a quasi-Division I team in his first year with a brutal schedule in the best conference in the country, you could argue. And then he lost his best player to what's been, for the most part, a season-ending injury. Pharrell Payne. I know how he got hired. I do. They were scrambling in the wake of the Willard debacle. And Colleen Sorum, who was the assistant athletic director, who Kevin Willard had a major problem with, a lot of people apparently had a major problem with, she ended up making the hire or spearheading the search. And she said, my God, we got somebody here in Buzz Williams who's interested. Look at what he's done at Marquette, at Virginia Tech, at Texas A&M. Dude goes to the tournament basically every year. I mean, 3 out of 5 years at A&M, 3 out of 5 years at Virginia Tech, 5 out of 6 years at Marquette. and he was ready to move on from College Station. I suggested that there was a lot of other possibilities for that. But I know he's won everywhere. And I also know this, that for the most part, with the exception of his first year at Marquette, which was a different landscape in the sport, he's struggled in his first year everywhere he's been. Virginia Tech, they were 11-22 and 2-16 in the ACC his first year. At Texas A&M, they were 16-14, 10-8. And then in the COVID year, they had a limited schedule. But then his third year, they won 27 games. And the last 3 years, they were in the tournament, finishing second in the SEC, and then, a couple of other strong, SEC seasons ending up in the tournament. Guy can coach. Nobody will tell you in the sport that he can't coach. So, yeah, I'm going to give it time. Scrambled to put together barely a team in 15 players he had to put together. Lost his best player. And right now, has a consensus top 5 recruiting class coming in next year. Will that mature enough, quickly enough to be good enough for them to be a contender next year in the Big Ten? Depends on what they get in the portal. Depends on whether or not Pharrell Payne can stay and decides to stay. But, yeah, it has nothing to do. My take the other day, Tim, was I can't get worked up and get to the point where so many Maryland fans are like, you gotta cut losses now. He's not the right guy. I can't get to that point yet. Do I think that his style is different? The personality is different than what we've been used to? I mean, it's a different personality than even Mark Turgeon's personality, and he was a Midwest guy. So Kevin Willard's personality was perfect. Gary's personality, perfect for an East Coast, heavy kind of Northeast, East Coast fan base, personality. I get it. I get that Buzz's personality is not necessarily in sync with that, but I don't really care about that if he wins. And I'm willing to give it time. And by the way, there's no way they can cut him loose. She signed him, and the president of the university signed him to a many-year deal. I mean, 6-7 years. They can't pay Loxley's $13 million to buy him out. You think they're going to pay off Buzz Williams? Yes, there probably would be more interest if they felt like he was the wrong guy because it's basketball versus football at Maryland. But no, there's no way you're gonna dupe me into calling for Buzz's head after what he had to go through when he got here and what he's gone through so far this year. The recruiting class that he's put together will be one of the great recruiting classes in Maryland basketball history, really since Lefty was a coach, in terms of where it will be ranked. It'll be top 3 to 5 in the country. It's going to be one of the best ever. And they got the guy from Silver Spring, Baba, who everybody thinks is the next Kevin Durant. Yes, I understand recruiting the portal is probably as important, if not more, than 16 and 17-year-olds. But we've seen freshmen this year dominate. I mean, the kid at Illinois, the kid at Houston, and then A.J. DeBonsa at BYU, who, after I talked about him on Monday's show, I'm pretty sure I did, in what he had done against Utah on Saturday night, he was amazing against Utah. They played Arizona 2 nights ago. I didn't talk about it on the show yesterday, but I watched that game, and he had a rough game. Man, is Arizona loaded and good. They're really good. College basketball, I'm just starting to kind of get into it a little bit after football. Football really has taken over all of our worlds for the most part. And college basketball, I've said this before, but over the last 10 years, minimum, it's become a 1 month out of the sports calendar sport, March. But Arizona's 20-0, ranked number 1 in the country. They are so good. In Nebraska, last night lost for the first time. Great basketball game at Michigan. I mean, that first half, I doubt any of you watched it. 50-48 at halftime. Nebraska led, and then the second half was an old style Big Ten grinded out game, and Michigan gave Nebraska and Fred Hoiberg, who does such a great job at Nebraska, their first loss. Imagine this, by the way. Nebraska before last night was undefeated in basketball, and Indiana in football won the national championship. Yeah, Nebraska's really good in basketball this year in the Big Ten. The Big Ten at the top, man, with Michigan and Nebraska and Michigan State and Illinois and Purdue, who lost again last night. They've lost 3 straight, but man, the top of the Big Ten is just unbelievable. I'd say the same thing, too, about the Big 12. The top of the Big 12 is loaded right now. You've got Arizona, who's in the Big 12. I know that sounds weird. You've got Houston. You've got Texas Tech. You've got Iowa State. You've got BYU with DeBonsa. And you've got Kansas. I mean, what did I just rip off? 5 teams? 6 teams in the top 15, top 20? Let me see where they are here. Arizona's number 1. Iowa State's 8. Houston's 10. Texas Tech's 11. BYU's 13 and Kansas is 14. Anybody else here? No. So that's 6 teams in the top 25. And the Big Ten right now has, going into this week, Michigan was 3, Nebraska was 5, Michigan State was 7, Illinois was 9, Purdue was 12. 4 teams in the top 10, 5 in the top 12. And Purdue was number 1 earlier in the season. They've actually lost 3 straight games, including to Indiana last night. And they've got some other really good teams. Wisconsin's played well. UCLA's played well. It's weird. UCLA, Big Ten, just like Maryland, Big Ten. Maryland's not the worst team in the Big Ten. Penn State's winless. Maryland's got 1 win. And they've had a schedule where they've played number 11 Illinois, number 10 Michigan State on the road, and Sunday at home, 1 o'clock, they play Purdue in College Park. And this game against Purdue over the last 7-8 years at home has always been a massive game on the Big Ten schedule. Not really going to be this year. So I get your frustration, Tim. And yeah, there have been coaches that I liked at Maryland. I thought Willard was excellent. I thought Mark was much better than you guys thought, even though at the very end, I understood the tiredness of not getting out of the first round of the NCAA tournament. And I talked extensively about me, too, feeling like it had gotten stale to a certain point. But no, I'm not ready to run Buzz off on my show. That's not going to happen. He has, a major mountain to climb, and next year will be a big year to see how these freshmen and what he can do in the portal, and can he keep Pharrell Payne here? And we'll see what happens next year. I would certainly imagine that, a program like Maryland with the kind of talent it can attract, Buzz has been a good coach, has won. You're not going to have this kind of year, I don't think, two years in a row. All right, let's get to Belichick. We'll do that after these words from a few of our sponsors. So you all know by now, I'm sure, that Bill Belichick, the 8-time Super Bowl winning coach, coached in 44 playoff games. Believe it or not, Andy Reid has now coached in more playoff games than Belichick. I always get into these deep dives on coaching records and playoff records, etc. Belichick has the most wins at 31, and obviously the most Super Bowl wins with 6 in 9 appearances as a head coach. I mean, 6 Super Bowls, 9 Super Bowls total, 6 Super Bowl wins. But Belichick's career playoff win percentage is 705. Now, Lombardi's is the best of all time, but he only coached in 10 playoff games. Why? Well, he had a shorter career as a head coach, number one. Number two is you played basically one game and then the NFL championship game. There wasn't the expanded playoff format. But Bill Belichick's, overall game count of being in the playoffs, 44 to 40, one short of Andy Reid, but he's got 31 wins and a 705 win percentage in the postseason. Bill Belichick's regular season win total is still behind Hallis and Shula. I mean, he theoretically could catch both of them if he came back to coach in pro football. And I heard some suggestions this morning that that's why some people voted no. If you don't know the details, Belichick fell short of the 40 out of 50 votes needed for induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame during this first year of eligibility for him. Sources in the Don Van Natta, Seth Wickersham story, ESPN.com, with firsthand knowledge of the outcome, said that Belichick received a call from the Hall of Fame and was given the news, which is unusual, I guess. Several sources who spoke with the coach over the weekend after he received the news described Belichick as, quote, puzzled and disappointed, closed quote. Apparently, he made a comment, 6 Super Bowls isn't enough. I'll add that he won 2 as a defensive coordinator for Bill Parcells' New York Giants. The 86 Giants won the Super Bowl, and the 1990 Giants won the Super Bowl. And they were certainly defensive-led for the most part. And Belichick was, if Belichick had never gotten a head coaching opportunity, if he had been the Spagnuolo of his time or the Vic Fangio of his time. I know Spags got an opportunity, and so did Fangio in Denver. But let's just say that he just wasn't cut out to be a head coach. He would have been, Dick LeBeau, Bud Carson, where we'd be talking about his resume as worthy of the Hall of Fame as a coordinator. But of course, that's not where his career went. His career went into head coaching, where he obviously has compiled the greatest resume in NFL coaching history. Whenever these things happen, when they're so obvious, I immediately start to think, is there like a contrarian take here that even makes sense, that I would even feel emotionally? No. This is the most obvious and egregious thing I think I've ever seen with respect to this kind of off the field stuff, non-game stuff, the other stuff, the Hall of Fames, the drafts, the combines, all the schedules, whatever it is, all the other stuff surrounding the NFL that isn't game related. And clearly, I know that there are some voting procedures that allow of these 5 candidates that were on that coach senior committee, group, because the coaches are not involved in the current player voting, that you're only allowed to vote for 3 out of the 5. And maybe some of them decided, well, he's going to eventually get in. Let me get some of these other guys in first, whatever. If you're a Hall of Fame voter and you got your Hall of Fame ballot and Bill Belichick's name was on it, and you didn't check yes, you shouldn't have the ability to vote for the Hall of Fame anymore. It's that ridiculous. That's everybody's take. I can't conjure up anything new. Bill Belichick is the greatest coach in NFL history resume-wise. Now, I would debate that Don Shula, in terms of the way I felt about Shula's Miami teams over all of those years, I always felt like Shula got more out of less better than anybody else did in the history of the game. Belichick's, rosters weren't littered with Hall of Famers, but Tom Brady was the quarterback. And yes, Don Shula did have Dan Marino as his quarterback. Ironically, he didn't win his Super Bowls with Dan Marino at quarterback. He won his Super Bowls with Bob Greasy at quarterback. And Earl Morrall, who came in for Greasy in 72 when Greasy was hurt. And then Greasy eventually came back for the postseason, and he was the guy that quarterbacked Miami to the perfect season finale against Washington in Super Bowl VII. Like I've always felt like Don Shula, in terms of X's and O's and getting more out of less, was the best, but his resume is not the best because of the postseason differences between he and Belichick. Yeah, he won more regular season games than anybody else, but Don Shula was a first ballot Hall of Famer. And of course, we're always going to be in this town, most of us, very much predisposed to immediately thinking, well, who was better than Joe Jackson Gibbs? Not many, that's for sure. I don't consider Joe Gibbs to be the greatest coach in NFL history. I don't. But he's certainly in the conversation of the top 5 coaches in NFL history. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Joe Gibbs has the highest postseason win percentage for coaches that coached in at least 15 postseason games. Let me repeat that. Joe Gibbs has the best postseason win percentage, 708, of coaches that coached in at least 15 postseason games. Gibbs coached in 24 postseason games, won 17 of them, lost 7. That's the greatest win percentage for coaches with 15 or more. Now, Walsh coached in 14 and has a slightly better record overall than Gibbs at 10-4. That's a 714 win percentage. But of guys that have coached in 15 or more, Gibbs coached in 24. He's got the highest playoff win percentage of all time. Of course, Joe Gibbs is in the conversation of top 5 coaches because beyond the resume is how he did it. Winning 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. That's something that's never been done. But I'm there could be, it's the voting procedures, it's what they're asking him to do. L.C. Greenwood, a couple of other people. I want to get these guys in, so I'm going to use my 3 votes for this. Sorry. None of that explains it. Spygate, Deflategate, don't explain it. The thought that he might come back and coach again. Joe Gibbs came back and coached again as a Hall of Famer. Who cares? Who cares if a coach is already in the Hall of Fame and he's still coaching or he comes back to coach again? I don't understand why that would be an issue. Apparently, a lot of voters had an issue when Gibbs came back in 2004 to coach as a Hall of Fame coach. I mean, he was out of the game for 11 seasons. I mean, there was no thought when they put him into the Hall of Fame that he was coming back. He was already a successful, NASCAR owner. That doesn't make any sense. Spygate, Deflategate, of course, there's a lot of people that feel this is the reason, but there's no morality clause in the NFL Hall of Fame voting. Baseball has it. That's why Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds and certain others aren't in the Hall of Fame. You don't have that in the NFL. It's based on pure accomplishment. Jimmy Johnson absolutely went crazy with what happened. He tweeted out, he's got multiple tweets on this, but most recently he ripped those that voted against him, if they did, for Spygate and Deflategate, saying everybody was trying to Spygate as well as the Patriots were. He wrote, I'd like to know the names of the a-holes who did not vote for him. They are too cowardly to identify themselves. There's the issue of Bill Polian apparently being a huge influence in and Belichick not being a first ballot Hall of Famer, the all-time, general manager of the Colts. And multiple people have interviewed him. Number one, he said, I had zero to do and never said a thing to any other voter about keeping Belichick out first ballot. But then he couldn't remember if he voted for Belichick or not. There are 11 that did not vote for him out of 50. 11. The Belichick 11. Who are they? Because honestly, you got to be pretty numb, really numb, to see his name on the ballot, not vote for him immediately. The ballot should have showed up with a check mark already in his box. Does Brady not get in for Spygate and Deflategate? We'll come back to this later on in the show. Gary Myers, Hall of Fame voter. He tweeted out, I believe in transparency and had no issue revealing that I voted for Belichick. Gary Myers will join us at 12 to discuss this. Charge on Daronte Jones, the new DC in DC. Next.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It is Wednesday. There is still snow on the ground here in D.C., and here's what's happening. The Broncos, they fired their offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, last night. Many expect this to set up Davis Webb for a promotion to offensive coordinator. More on that as the day continues. But Bill Belichick, as we just covered, will not be a first ballot Hall of Famer, according to ESPN source Bill Polian told some voters that the former Patriots head coach should, quote, wait a year as penance for his involvement in the 2007 Spygate scandal. Polian denies the allegations, but when asked if he voted for Belichick into the Hall, he responded with 95% sure that he voted for Coach Belichick. Last night, the Wizards, they earn a home win against the Trailblazers. Alex Sarr with another double-double, his 10th on the year. Wizards hang on 115-111, and the Caps, they fall in a late-night matchup versus the Seattle Kraken, but not all bad for the struggling squad. Alex Ovechkin notches his 19th career tally, or 919th career NHL tally in a 5-1 loss, again, to the Seattle Kraken. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command all off-season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
This was Jimmy Johnson's tweet this morning. If they are using the excuse of Spygate, that's ridiculous. Many teams, including ourselves, tried it. Howard Mudd at Kansas City, who later coached for Bill Polian, he's mentioning names here, and Tony Dungy gave us the idea. He was the best. We didn't get anything and stopped, but many teams gave it a try. Joining me right now to talk about the Daronte Jones hire. Washington's got their new defensive coordinator. We found that out the other night. Is our good friend Paul Charchian at Paul Charchian on X. K-fan in Minnesota, podcast galore, fantasy football expert, but really just a good conversation about everything when we have him on. So before we get to Daronte Jones and your thoughts on Washington's new defensive coordinator, what was your reaction to the Belichick not being a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Two things that are not incompatible. One was it's absurd because he's inarguably the most successful coach of all time. But then there was the petty side of me who, like any normal person, dislikes Bill Belichick and sort of reveled in the comeuppance that he got for treating basically everybody like an ass. And, I just, to some degree, how you treat other people in life should count for something. And he was just a miserable person. And there's part of me, the petty, small part of me, Kevin, that thinks, you know what, if he needs to sit 1 year and maybe use this as a lesson in, just building alliances and just being a decent human being, then maybe this is the right thing.
It's interesting because one of the takes from people is that it was the fact that media people couldn't stand him, that he wasn't great to media people. But, people inside that sport revered him and liked him, and people who've gotten to know him outside of football like him a lot. Here's what I would say to you, and we've known each other forever. If you had a Hall of Fame vote and you don't, nor do I, and you didn't vote for him for what you described right there, I'd advocate that you never be allowed to vote again. Seriously. That ballot should have come, that it should have arrived with that box already checked to make it easy for everybody.
Right. Look, you're correct, and those things shouldn't matter, right? The intangibles, I don't believe, should matter in your Hall of Fame voting. How that person treated you is not relevant to whether or not that person should be in the Hall of Fame. If you killed somebody and that person's lover, that does not disqualify you from the Hall of Fame, apparently.
Not the Football Hall of Fame. It doesn't.
No, not the Football Hall of Fame. So, yes, it should not matter. And like I said, he should have gotten in. And it's petty, but there is part of me that feels good about it. But yes, you're correct. It's a travesty. He's the best. Bill Belichick is the best coach in the history of football, and I'm including Lombardi in that.
Yeah, for me, and I said this in the open, for me, like I have always felt, and you and I have had great conversations about the NFL yesteryear. I always thought that Don Shula got more out of less than any coach I ever watched. And I know that he had Dan Marino for all those years, but he didn't win the Super Bowls with Dan Marino. They didn't win a Super Bowl with Marino. They only got to one. And those teams were not good defensively. They weren't very good as running teams. It was Marino and the Marx Brothers. That was basically it, for those 80s teams. But I always kind of felt like if you gave me the choice of Shula for a season or Belichick for a season, I think I'd take Shula. But that doesn't matter. The resume is the all-time greatest by far. By far.
Yeah.
Every market, every NFL market. Actually, I don't know if it's every NFL market. Probably not every NFL market. But you're a fan of the Vikings and lived in Minnesota forever. And I'm here in DC, and we both have a coach that everybody in the history of the fan base reveres more than anybody else. For you guys, it's Bud Grant. For us, it's Joe Gibbs. Joe Gibbs actually followed, there was a coach in between, Jack Pardee, but also another Hall of Fame coach, George Allen. in the 70s. I mean, George Allen was an innovator and an all-time great NFL coach for sure. But when we have these conversations about the greatest coaches, for us, we get a little bit chesty when it comes to Gibbs because Gibbs has the best win percentage in postseason history for anybody that's coached at least 15 playoff games. He won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. No one's ever done that. And we've always felt that Gibbs deserves to be in that top 5 conversation, worst case. What do you guys say when you're talking about the legend of Bud Grant?
Well, let me just mention this about Gibbs. What I remember so much about Gibbs as a teenager was the rivalry games. Yeah. I mean, even for somebody that was not in the Washington area, the Cowboys-Redskins games.
Yep.
Landry versus Gibbs, just absolutely epic. And John Reagan's and Kelvin Bryant, right, is of that era. Ernest Biner, I think, was that era. And, just the epic interdivisional rivalries were, and Giants was the other one, right? This is the Parcells era, I assume.
Yeah, Parcells and Gibbs. Yeah, Parcells is the only coach that had a winning record against Gibbs.
Wow. Everybody else. There's 40 other coaches or something, probably more than 40 over Gibbs' tenure. It's probably like 50 or 60 coaches had a losing record against Gibbs. So rest assured, nationally, those rivalries were absolutely epic. For us in Minnesota, it's Bud Grant by a mile, because not just because he delivered 4 Super Bowls, no wins, but 4 Super Bowls, but because of who he was. He was the stoic Nordic Vikings coach with the Swedish heritage, the guy that rarely ever cracked a smile but was actually playful behind the scenes and a prankster and everything. Can I tell you my favorite Bud Grant story?
Was it him basically in short sleeves, on a -17 wind chill factor game?
That did happen about 6 years ago.
Yeah, I remember.
When the Vikings were playing outside, waiting for U.S. Bank Stadium 10 years ago, waiting for U.S. Bank Stadium to be built. And
in the playoff game where the guy missed the short field goal.
That's right. It was against Seattle, and Seattle would go on to the Super Bowl that year. And the Vikings were going to salt it away with a 27-yard field goal that missed with time expiring. So that one hurts a lot of the Vikings losses. I believe the year was 1990. I'm at the Super Bowl, and at the Super Bowl they announced the Hall of Famers. Now at this time, 1990-ish, so it was around 90. Most of the Vikings from the Purple People Eaters were still not in. And to that point, I don't think Bud Grant was in the Hall of Fame yet. But at that point, it's only like Alan Page. It's massive oversight on who's
Tarkington wasn't in the Hall of Fame at that point.
He wasn't a first balloter. Tarkington, speaking of first ballot missed justices, Fran Tarkington finished with every passing record in the books when he wrapped up his career, and he wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer.
That's crazy.
Absurd.
I didn't know that.
So I'm at the Super Bowl, and Bud is standing next to me. We're in the conference room where they're going to announce the finalists for the Hall of Fame for that year, and no Vikings are in it. And I see Bud storms out, and I go with Bud. Bud and I don't know each other at that point. We'd end up talking many times later, but we didn't know each other then. And there's this long elevator inside this big hotel. And I'm on the elevator and I'm right next to Bud. But again, we're not talking. I'm just next to Bud. And over the course of the elevator ride, Bud Grant starts heave crying as the escalator is going up this long progression to whatever level we were going to. And it's Bud Grant. I mean, this is a guy notoriously never showed emotion. And he broke down completely because his guys did not get recognized once again.
Wow. I know that he loved those guys and he loved that town. And I mean, look, our memories are, you remember, and I try to explain this to my sons and younger fans, the significance of what the Redskins were to the NFL and the rivalries specifically with the Cowboys were to not just the two towns, but to the league. I mean, twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, usually the 4:00 window or on Monday Night Football, it was Redskins-Cowboys. Redskins-Cowboys, I think up until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, had the most head-to-head matchups in prime time of any matchup in the history of the game.
Wow.
I think Raiders-Broncos actually passed it. But for me, I remember these epic playoff games outside, in Bloomington, where it was 10 below zero, and it's Vikings Rams in multiple NFC championship games, or the Hail Mary game with Staubach. I mean, the Vikings were a big part of my youth in watching football as well. Hell, Washington and Minnesota played a lot in the postseason, over a 15, 20-year period. They played, I think six times against each other, 5 or 6 times. But anyway, yeah. So
one quick note on the Rams Vikings winter matchups. I got a chance to talk to Jack Youngblood once in the Hall of Fame to continue our Hall of Fame cycle on this.
Played in the Super Bowl with a broken leg. Yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable, right? And Jim was not related to him, which is always unbelievable to me. He said for one of the Vikings playoffs games that we were talking about, they walked off the bus at the airport and they knew they had already lost. It was 0 degrees. They're from Southern California, and they knew at the airport the game was over.
Tony Dorsett said, Drew Pearson said it, that in the 82 season, the January 83 championship game, when they came out of the tunnel 45 minutes for warm-ups before kickoff and the stadium was completely filled, chanting, "We want Dallas," they said, we knew we were in trouble.
I bet.
So let's talk about Daronte Jones, because I called you last week or the week before about Brian Flores. So I texted you. You said you know a little bit about this guy and what Washington's getting in a defensive coordinator. So tell us what you know about Washington's new hire.
Yeah, well, you're going to get another aggressive defensive coach. If you look at the pedigree that he's worked with, it's all guys that attack. Vance Joseph, Mike Zimmer, and Brian Flores. That's who he's learned from. I mean, that's some fantastic defensive work right there. And what they have in common is they are going to give you bizarre pre-snap looks. They are going to change their defenses on the fly, and they are going to come after the quarterback. And for everybody around the Vikings knew that Daronte Jones was going to be a defensive coordinator. Last year, at this time, he interviewed for some jobs. Didn't get them, but he leveraged that into an expanded role. They added passing game coordinator to his title in addition to DB coach. And so, the Vikings knew he was the guy. And had Brian Flores become your defensive coordinator, not ours, or taken a head coaching job, Daronte Jones would be our defensive coordinator. So by all reports, he's, we didn't get a lot of chances to interact with him, but we did see him do things like, breaking down tape. They'd have video from him, breaking down plays and stuff. He knows X's and O's inside and out. He's believed to be an excellent motivator. And also, Daronte Jones is believed to be a big part in Viking safety Harrison Smith's decision to keep playing these last couple of years when he didn't need to. He's been around forever. He's already given himself a Hall of Fame, decent Hall of Fame chance. The thing that you'll need to watch with Daronte Jones is he's never called plays other than some preseason action. So he'll need to learn to call plays on the fly, and that should be considered a real concern. When you look at first-year play callers, sometimes it goes badly. Look at what happened with the Eagles this year. Look at Don Morton with the Lions this year. So that's the thing that's the big unknown on Daronte Jones.
So really good information, and one of the things that I was told he was incredibly impressive in the interview, and that Flores probably said, I'm not going to be available, but you should absolutely interview Daronte Jones, who other teams had interviewed as well. We talked a little bit just about some of the smoke around Brian Flores. Well, clearly it wasn't enough for him not to go back there to be the defensive coordinator, but he is, and I think this is fair, you tell me if it isn't, he is a bit of a short shelf life guy. there's only so many years you can be with him, working for him, working with him before it becomes difficult. We saw that in Miami, and maybe we've seen some of that in Minnesota. You can speak to that. And the reason I bring it up is it possible that anybody leaves Minnesota and that staff for an elevated role in Washington? And is there anybody that you can think of that would be a candidate for that?
Well, a couple of quick things. A longtime Vikings assistant, and I'm not sure exactly what his title was, but Mike Pettin was on this staff the last couple of years. And when Pettin decided to leave the staff this year, and then was asked about Brian Flores this week, he said, I'm paraphrasing, "It's best that I don't say anything about Brian Flores." It's just. Flores has just this. He's back on a 1-year deal right now, and what's not clear is who wanted the 1-year deal. Is it because the Vikings felt like they can only manage one more year of Brian Flores, or is it Flores who wants to be a free agent at the end of next year? He's got 1 year to rehab his reputation. Brian Flores needs to come out of 2026 not only with a great Vikings defense, but also with a series of players and coaches who are willing to stand up and say, Brian is a good guy. He's a good leader. He's somebody people want to be around. And he needs some people that are willing to campaign for him. And he has not been able to do that to this point. And maybe he's not ready for that yet. So the fact that Mike Pettin refused to talk about him was very, very telling. And I think Flores is going to have to do and be better than in those regards, those intangible regards, if he wants to move forward with the job, someplace next year.
Did Harrison Smith officially retire?
No. The presumption is, and the way they acted in the final game was,
I remember.
It certainly sounded like that was going to be the case. But it is unknown if he's going to retire. But I think there's a 90% chance that he will.
He would be an unrestricted free agent if he doesn't, correct? I think so.
I don't know that that's true. That may be true.
The last thing our fan base is going to want is a 37-year-old safety. We already had the oldest team in the league, but Harrison Smith's been one hell of a player in Minnesota his whole career, man. Great player.
He really has. And we think he's a Hall of Famer who's been languishing in the cornfields, flyover country. If he had played in a big media coastal city, he would be regarded as one of the 5 best safeties of all time, which he is.
Right. Thanks for doing this. Always enjoy the conversation.
It's been a ton of fun.
Talk to you soon.
You got it, my man. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Paul Charchian, everybody. NFL breaking coaching news when we come back. Todd Monken is the new head coach in Cleveland. So that leaves Arizona and Vegas now. Right? I think so.
Yeah, no, that's it. Those are the last two jobs.
Yeah, Arizona and Vegas. Todd Monken, the OC in Baltimore the last couple of years under John Harbaugh, coaching Lamar Jackson, will head to Cleveland, where he will replace Kevin Stefanski. Monken is 59 years old, turned 60 in February, and has never been an NFL head coach. Now, I guess from our standpoint, keeping it close to home, it means that Monken's not going to be Jackson Dart's offensive coordinator in New York, because the Giants, I think, were expecting to hire Monken if he didn't get a head coaching job. He did. This also means, by the way, that I think Cliff Kingsbury's chances are now pretty much down to zero. I don't know. We know that Arizona wouldn't be a possibility because that's where he was a head coach. But I don't know that he's really up there on the list for the Raiders opportunities. I think I was thinking about Cliff and where he was going to end up. There are possibilities, all over the place. Look, this is, I think, the largest availability of coordinator positions, offensive and defensive coordinators, that we've ever seen, or certainly in my memory. I mean, so many coordinators have been boomed this year, not just ours, across the board. I mean, Aaron Glenn's fired almost his entire staff in New York. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be able to fill out a staff. The Jets are a mess, an absolute mess. I'm not so sure that, given how late, we've seen some of these moves. I mean, is it possible the Jets fire Aaron Glenn and try to hire another head coach? He had a disastrous first year. First of all, he came in as a defensive guru, right? And decided he was going to be a defensive head coach, CEO style, with no head coaching experience. Yeah, of course, Dan Quinn comes to mind. Dan Quinn's been a head coach before, took a team to a Super Bowl before in Atlanta, several years as a head coach. So he learned from that experience. And by the way, had the ability to attract a lot of really solid assistants and even position coaches that he felt good about. With Aaron Glenn, it wasn't a great staff to begin with, and then he took himself out of calling defensive plays. The Browns apparently had quite the interview process. It included filling out certain questionnaires, personality questionnaires. I don't know how unusual it was. It certainly seemed like many made it out to be a very unusual process, led by their general manager, Andrew Berry, who led the search. Look, they got quarterback issues. The one thing I kept thinking about Cleveland in particular is, if a defensive guy, like say a Jim Schwartz, was kept, and now we'll see what happens with Jim Schwartz. Monken and Schwartz, not a bad combination if Schwartz wants to stay there as a defensive coordinator. I don't know if he's got a shot at the Raiders job or the Arizona job. But I kept thinking that if, let's just say, they retained Schwartz or they hired a defensive guy, that would be a spot in which you would consider Kingsbury, and then Mariota would follow Kingsbury to Cleveland. And with that defense, you'd have a turnaround season next year. Now, I'm not saying that they would turn it around into a Super Bowl contender, because I don't view Marcus Mariota as that kind of a quarterback, but their defense has been Super Bowl caliber for a few years now. And so they just don't have a quarterback. Although Shadur Sanders is a Pro Bowler. Did you see that? Have we talked about that this week? I forget.
I haven't been here, but I have seen the news and heard the news, and I'm very excited about said news.
Shadur Sanders and the election of him to the Pro Bowl as an alternate guy because people were dropping out really makes the Pro Bowl now, and the Pro Bowl alternate, accolade. It really renders it, useless and worthless. And I think that's a shame because, Pro Bowls next to your name in Pro Football Reference or in Wikipedia over the course of a career, help build the case for things like Hall of Fame. And there were so many. He was truly, from a QBR standpoint, he was the worst quarterback in the league this year that started more than 3 games. I mean, he was horrendous. Now, there were a couple of moments here and there, and Stefanski got some things out of him with the bootleg game and the play-action game, but he was legitimately named a Pro Bowl alternate. And that's just a mockery of the process. Now, why would they do that? They do that because there's no game. It's a flag football thing. And you have a situation where it's a television show. Because there's no game, the game itself used to get a great rating, but I think this flag football and all of these skills competition things that they do, I'll be honest with you, I haven't watched it once, but I know it's not a game anymore. I think it's not done as well as they would have thought, perhaps, ratings-wise. So maybe Shadur being there is a move to get some attention to the game. It's the wrong attention to get. I mean, I'm not going to go off on this, but you don't give somebody a Pro Bowl designation in front of guys like Trevor Lawrence, as an example, in the AFC, for that purpose, because you think that the show itself might draw more eyeballs if he's in it. It makes a mockery of the Pro Bowl designation. Look, I know some people believe the Pro Bowl designation on its own is a bit of a mockery because it's, fan-based, it's, all the combination, and it's a popularity contest with the players having the vote. And I think the AP teams, first, second teams, are actually more representative of the best players in the league, but people would argue with that because it's all media voted. But yeah, sorry, but that's a bad move by the AFC or the NFL to do that. I'm not saying Shadur Sanders he can't become a good quarterback, but he certainly was not a Pro Bowl alternate quarterback in 2025. I mean, he legitimately had one of the worst QBR and passer ratings of any quarterback that played this year. How does that happen? Seriously. How Sam Howell had a better case 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2023, of being a Pro Bowl alternate. And he was terrible. But he had a couple of games. Shadur didn't even have one decent game. Did he? I'm looking through his game log right now. I mean, his QBR for the season was 18.9. He had one game that wasn't horrendous. Against Tennessee, he was 23 of 42 for 364, 3 touchdowns, a pick, and he had a 54.8 QBR. So without that game, he's down in the single digits QBR. Everything else was horrendous. That's really embarrassing. Why did they do that? Why would they have done that? It's no knock on whether or not he's going to become something. I don't think he will personally, but if you do, that's fine. It's not a knock on what he might become with Todd Monken in Cleveland. That'll be interesting to see who Todd Monken, who is a bit of a quarterback guy and an offensive guy. And, so is Stefanski. So we'll see who he chooses as quarterback. But back to Cliff. Wherever Cliff lands, and maybe he doesn't land anywhere. That's possible. Remember, he's still getting paid one more season, head coaching money by Arizona. I think I said towards the end of the season that was up. I was wrong about that. Somebody corrected me. He's got one more year of Arizona head coaching money. So it's not like, he's going back for the money. He's going to wait for the right opportunity. But I don't think he's getting a head coaching opportunity. But if you went to Arizona, maybe Mariota goes with him there. Would Mariota go with him to Vegas if he became the offensive coordinator there, or a head coach there with Mendoza as a mentor for Mendoza? Style of play would be different with Mendoza than it was with Jaden, or it was with Kyler Murray when Kingsbury was the coach for the Cardinals. Anyway, all right. I want to get back to Daronte Jones and talk about this hire and give you guys a chance. We didn't get all of your calls in yesterday. So if you want to weigh in on Daronte Jones, thumbs up or thumbs down as a hire, and get into it if you want. There are a lot of angles to this. You know, I do think for some of you, it's like you didn't want Dan Quinn to hire from the Dan Quinn tree. Well, he didn't do that. And at the same time, some of you were, actually desiring something different. And you did get that. Some of you wanted a non-Dan Quinn guy, but a guy with a big-time resume. You didn't get that. The bottom line here is he's got two young coordinators who have never done it before. And there's a reasonable conclusion that some might come to that might say, man, does he not know that he better win this year or else? Does he not know that the seat has warmed considerably after this past season? Because if he had known that or felt that, wouldn't he have hired bigger names, taken less risk? I don't feel that way. I feel like Blau and the hiring of Blau and Jones are completely different hires. Blau was always in the mix to be the next offensive coordinator here. Nobody in the building, not just Quinn, nobody in the building wanted them to miss out on the opportunity to see David Blau get a chance to be an offensive coordinator. They thought it would come as a result of Cliff Kingsbury getting a head coaching job after a year or two here in Washington. And, hey, Cliff, great job here. We wish you the best. He's going off to be a head coach, in Tennessee or whatever. It didn't happen that way. They moved on from Cliff, even without Cliff having a head coaching opportunity, and it doesn't look like he'll get one in this carousel, off-season carousel. But it happened another way, but it happened because they have felt very strongly about Blau. Daronte Jones, let's face it, he's not choice number one. He wasn't choice number one. These kinds of things will never get disclosed by the powers that be. They're not going to say, hey, we fell in love with Jonathan Gannon. We fell in love with Brian Flores. Dan always wanted, from the moment he demoted Joe Witt Jr., he thought there was a pretty good chance Raheem was going to get fired, and he wanted Jeff Ulbrich to be the defensive coordinator here. That was always the first choice. And I do believe that guys like Ulbrich, Flores, even though that may have been a pipe dream, and Gannon were certainly guys that if they were available and interested, one of those three would have been the coordinator here. But it does sound like they got a guy that is an up-and-comer. Maybe not to the extent that David Blau was talked about as an up-and-comer and already anointed as the next big thing. But the more we've learned about Daronte Jones, interviewed last year, interviewed this year, interest, leadership capability, the only thing he's done, as Charch said, he hasn't called plays, but a highly respected guy on that staff. The reason Harrison Smith came back and played another year or two, a guy that people really respected. Brian Flores is difficult. Daronte Jones was his, right hand for the last year or two in Minnesota. And that defense has been nasty for 2 years running. I mean, legit upper tier, finished DVOA 3 this year. Where did they finish last year? DVOA. I think it's top 5 too. They finished 3rd this year behind Seattle and Houston. Last year, they finished 2nd DVOA behind Philly. I mean, he has been a part of a top 3 defense for 2 straight seasons. The talent in Minnesota is different than the talent here. And, that leads to, so what will they be looking for? Look, I think they're going to be looking for defense. I mean, and I think a guy like Harrison Smith and the relationship that he had with Harrison Smith, according to Harrison Smith, who really respected Daronte Jones, that a Caleb Downs is definitely in play, big time in play, the safety from Ohio State. The guy that many people legitimately believe is a top 3 or 4 player in the draft. It's just, do you take, a safety that high. 7, yeah, my preference would be, without question, pass rusher. Give me the pass rusher first at number 7. But I also want the player that they feel has the best chance to become an elite level player. And there are a lot of people that do believe that that's Caleb Downs, more so than Reuben Bain. In some cases, more so than even a David Bailey. I think the Harrison Smith being one of the better players, being an anchor for them on the back end, being a super high IQ player, and Caleb Downs is spoken about in the exact same way, that this guy is the next great thing at safety. And he's got all of the physical abilities, and then he's got way off the charts, apparently, football IQ. And that's the kind of guy that maybe a Daronte Jones would recommend. Look, Daronte Jones is not going to make the pick. He'll participate, I'm sure, as the coordinators do. Cliff Kingsbury last year put the note on Adam Peters' desk before the draft, the big kid from Oregon, the tackle from Oregon, please. And they ended up selecting Connerly Jr. I don't know if a first-year defensive coordinator is going to slip a note on Adam Peters' desk that says the safety from Ohio State. My preference still would be if it's close. If it's close, look, best player available for this team. They need so much. But if it's close, I'd prefer the pass rusher. I'd prefer David Bailey, edge, Texas Tech. He is super quick twitch. He is going to be a problem, I think, for offenses and offensive coordinators. I like Reuben Bain a lot. I like Bailey a little bit more. I do like Downs a lot. Best player available for sure. I just hope for sure it's on defense at 7. All right. Phone lines are open. Daronte Jones reaction day 2. We now have, and it can be a reaction just to, an offseason that began with a need for 2 coordinators, and Dan Quinn has hired 2 coordinators who have never done it before. Calls next, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, we got to a few calls yesterday, but we got an opportunity here. Gary Myers, longtime NFL writer, Hall of Fame voter. He did vote for Bill Belichick. He's going to join me at 12 noon, so we'll get back to Belichick then. Your reaction to not just the hiring of Daronte Jones, which was a name, let's be fair, that 99.9% of you had not heard until you read that he had been interviewed for the job here over the weekend or maybe last Friday at this point. And also the elevation of David Blau. I mean, we went into this thing in January, early January, when the season ended, thinking, hey, Kevin Stefanski, hey, Todd Monken, hey, the possibility of certainly, when Mike McDaniel became available, Mike McDaniel. And on the defensive side, I mean, Jeff Ulbrich, Raheem Morris, some big names. We ended up with a name that I think everybody did know in this fan base, and they certainly knew in Detroit, David Blau's name. But certainly Daronte Jones, older, been around a lot longer as a coach. I mean, I read his resume yesterday. It's a 2.5-decade grind, man. I mean, 15 different places all over the, North American map. I mean, he coached in Canada. He coached in Louisiana. He coached here in Maryland at Bowie State. He coached at Hawaii. He coached at UCLA. He coached with the Dolphins, the Bengals, the Vikings. I mean, it's one of those long journeys that I can really appreciate because I can only imagine the commitment to being a coach. So many of those guys travel that same, 2-decade plus every year, every 2 years, moving, often married with young kids, starting in new schools, starting over in a new neighborhood, the whole thing, new community, starting over just from a job standpoint. It's an amazing life. Look, a lot of people have those lives in different professions, but man, the coaching life is a commitment to the coach from a family standpoint. And they go where the best and the next opportunity presents itself. All right. They have their offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. By the way, my guy Devin wrote, Caleb Downs is the best player in this draft. It's a gimme that they should take him, but there's no chance he gets to 7. Yeah, I don't know if he's the best player in the draft, but he's probably, at least according to guys like Kuiper, et cetera, he's a top 5 player in this draft. And there's no doubt that the Harrison-Smith relationship, Daronte Jones puts a lot of stock into having a safety that is not only really good, but can play at a high intellectual level. And they say that that is the case with Caleb Downs. All right, let's start with Bobby in North Carolina. Bobby, go ahead.
Hey, Kev. I guess you're ready for round 2 of the weather coming up this weekend.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to stay. Anyway. I think it's going to stay mostly to our south and east. I think we might miss this one. And you know what? After last weekend, I'm okay with that. You might get it.
Well, we typically go, our biggest snows come off the coast when that low. Me living on the coast, so I'm looking for snow. But anyway, call me intrigued about the new hire with the DC, Kev. I've called you for the last million years every Monday, other than Greg Williamson. You're talking about we're just not aggressive enough. Don't blitz. Don't do this. If he can bring this same philosophy over that he's been under the last 3 years, be aggressive, blitz more, and cause havoc, Kevin, every coordinator gets a chance, and hopefully we've struck gold with this guy, and he'll have a chance and he'll prove himself out. But, you've been saying all week, just like I have, nobody knows until he gets under the fire, and has to call his own plays during the game. But I'm intrigued by it. I mean, hopefully, and I feel a little bit better, too, after you just talked with charts about if Flores would have took another job, they would have probably promoted him at Minnesota, made him their DC. So that kind of soothes me a little bit. But I think we're fine there. And the Blau hire, it was, I guess, a no-brainer because they've been talking about him for the last 2 or 3 years, in the organization. He was the next up-and-comer. So, and, familiarity is going to be good for Jaden in this thing. So I think we're fine there. So, just wait and see and get a few players. You got to have ball players, on defense to make this thing work and bring in 3 or 4 starters on defense and get 5 to stay healthy for at least 17 weeks next year and go back to work and see what happens, man,
Yeah, I mean, you said it, and I've said it the last couple of days. I have no idea. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued with two guys that have been highly thought of. Blau in particular, sort of anointed as the next big thing. Blau would clearly, at this point, had Washington not elevated him, he would have an offensive coordinator job. He would have it in Detroit. For starters, and there would have probably been significant competition for him. And there was a lot of interest in Daronte Jones last year and this year as well, but not, at the high levels. It's not like we were waking up during coaching carousel searches last year reading about Daronte Jones, or this year. I would bet that 99% of our fan base didn't really know the name until it got reported that Washington had interviewed him. Same with a guy like Carl Scott. These position guys forever, even if they've been around forever, most NFL fans don't know. And almost all NFL fans have no clue as to whether or not they'll be able to do it. I do think it's interesting, and you said intriguing. I'm intrigued too, because Quinn could have gone the route of something perception-wise that would have felt safe. That would have felt like, you know what? These are qualified guys who have done it before. He didn't do that. So, like I've said before, these are big hires for him. They've got to work, but I don't have a strong opinion on whether or not he got it right one way or the other at this point. I don't. Thanks, Bobby, as always. Let's go to Joe in Springfield. Joe, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, how are you? I'm glad you're okay after that fall you took. I'm still trying to dig out the shade of ice I got in my driveway.
So we are definitely a glacier right now. We're Greenland right now. But I got out fine. No, I did take a spill the other night, for those that don't know what Joe's talking about. I felt like briefly I may have been concussed, but I'm fine. I mean, some of you may think today's show, represents an appearance of being concussed, but we'll try to do better for the last hour and a half. But go ahead, Joe.
Well, they can keep thinking that, those viewers who think so. But anyway, the Daronte Jones hire, you know what? We didn't know. The fan base did not realize that they were making this decision. I mean, is this now? The question is, again, now with David Blau, for example, Dan Quinn did the right thing by hiring him before he got taken up by another team. And because we've seen from previous, like the Sheehan coaching tree, all the success those coaches had, like including Sean McVay, he was close to getting the Super Bowl this past weekend. I mean, so keeping David Blau is good. The Jones hire, we don't know right now. I mean, we need to know how he's going to be like. And of course, his resume has been pretty impressive the last couple of years in Minnesota. But, definitely we're going for a defensive player in the draft, especially a pass rusher. But, yeah, I mean, let's see what happens. I'm pretty sure Ian is going to have his depressive about, why are we doing this again kind of thing. But you know what? We just don't know about him.
He's on hold.
We'll see what happens.
He's on hold. We'll find out what he thinks. Maybe he'll shock us and actually love the moves.
Yeah, but Kevin, do we really know? Ian is always so depressive. You don't know what to think of him. That's all I'm saying. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, positivity, at least in this world that we all live in together, isn't necessarily his calling card, but maybe he's super positive in his other life, professional life, personal life. We'll find out because he's on hold.
Stay safe.
Good tease. Ian's up next. What'd you think of these the two hires, Ian? Positive about them?
No. And to the previous caller, look, I want this team to win. I was told when Harris and Peters were here and we have Jay Daniels that coaches would be lining up to coach for this program, that everything is so different. And in an off season where you have two coordinator openings, you got two completely unknowns. You're right. They could be the next greatest coordinators ever, but that is a huge risk. And again, here's what we do know. We know we have a coach with a 10-year record that's a 500 coach in Dan Quinn. You now have a quarterback who at one point we thought was a future Hall of Famer that we're not sure can stay upright for 17 games. You have a GM that has more misses than hits. And at the top of that miss list, how egregious is it that he didn't even interview Mike Vrabel, didn't even interview Mike McDonald, didn't get Ben Johnson, and
well, he did. They did interview Mike McDonald.
Did they interview Mike McDonald? Are you sure
Yeah,
about that?
they
I
had
thought
at
you
least the
didn't.
initial interview with him, via Zoom. Yes.
Okay. I stand corrected. He did not interview
Shocking.
Mike Vrabel. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, and you know that I wanted them to interview Mike Vrabel.
Of course I know you did. And the point is that I think from top to bottom, forget Harris. On Peters, there's enough questions out there. On Dan Quinn, we have a long enough track record. You have an offensive and defensive coordinator that are complete unknowns and are taking 2 promotions up in the case of Blau to this position, and a quarterback where you don't know his future health track record, and an off season where we're not sure they're going to be aggressive because, like you said with Ben Standing, they want to take the cap hit with Daron Payne, who's an inconsistent player at best. So when I look at the 2026 Washington Commander outlook, when they do the over-unders and projected things, I can't see how anyone wouldn't pick them 4th in the NFC East based on all these criteria.
I bet you they won't
everyone is
be.
like, oh, you're a Debbie Downer and you're negative. Look, I want this team to be good. I thought with Jane Daniels the future was bright. I stand corrected because there's a lot of objective data points that prove to the contrary.
Well, your Adam Peters thing is just, objectively wrong. We've done this exercise before of going through all of the players he signed, that were contributing players significant to the 2024 season. You know how I feel about 2024. Impossible to evaluate anything. I think anybody's out of their blanking mind to think that they know about this year, other than to be a bit concerned about Jaden Daniels' future ability to play 17, but he only missed 2 out of 54 college games, and he didn't miss any of the 20 games that he played as a rookie. But I don't slough that off as unreasonable based on being injured 3 different times in one season and being available for only 4 games start to finish this year. But that alone is the reason that I can't get worked up like you can about 2025, because we sat here a year ago pretty optimistic about a lot of things coming off 2024. And now you're not alone. The majority, I would say, of the fan base is not nearly as optimistic after 2025. And my answer to that is, I don't know what we had in 2025 because our best players didn't play enough. So
Kevin,
the Peters thing, though, is just objectively wrong for you to say that, he's gotten a lot more wrong than he's gotten right. And that's objectively, that's a fact. That's not a fact. Number 2 is you kept saying, we don't know if. You said that 3 times in your spiel there. And that's the part of what you said I agree with. We don't know if Jaden Daniels is going to stay upright for 17 games for the next 10 years. We don't know if David Blau is going to be the next Norv Turner, if Daronte Jones is going to be the next Vic Fangio. We don't know any of that. So the NFL is such a dynamic thing, as we know. It's really hard to declare anything about teams other than if they don't have a quarterback or if they're in complete disarray organizationally, which is what we were for so long, but we're not anymore. So I think there's a chance that this could work out, but there's also a chance that it might not. I'm intrigued, and I'm certainly going to be here to watch it and document it next year. But I can't throw in the towel. In many ways, you're not even throwing in the towel because you keep saying over and over again, we don't know if ... Yet your tone is you're throwing in the towel.
Can I rebut that comment?
Sure.
Okay. So, of course, none of us know the future. That's a supposition. My point is, in this offseason, first of all, you said on record multiple times you wouldn't have gotten rid of Kingsbury because this offense wasn't.
I didn't say that. Let me be very clear. I said over and over again, I'm certainly not going to be surprised if he comes back, and I'd be totally fine with that. He actually overachieved considering the circumstances. But I also said after that Minnesota game, there is a chance. I didn't think it would happen, and I was surprised by it, other than the reporting that kind of led up to it. I said there's a chance that maybe if he doesn't get a head coaching job, they decide to go in another direction. And my preference has always been a Shanahan-style offense, but I think Cliff did a very good job here for 2 seasons. I do.
So I agree with you that I would not have gotten rid of Cliff Kingsbury. We've talked on previous calls that I think he's kind of been a performative move where it's like we're going to change the offensive coordinator for whatever reason. But I still go back to this. You just said it. You prefer a Shanahan-style offense. In an off-season where you had a chance to replace 2 coordinators, and if the league is so in awe of Adam Peters and his ability to quote-unquote cook and rebuild the team, why aren't more coaches coming here? Why didn't the Mike McDaniels, the Brian Floreses, all these hot or up-and-coming proven defensive coordinators come? Kevin, at the beginning.
Well, hold on. The answers to that are obvious. I can't believe they're not obvious to you. Those guys were going for head coaching opportunities. That's not what the opportunity was here. And waiting for those guys was a risk.
But Kevin, they didn't. Mike McDaniel didn't have a formal interview here, and he took an offensive coordinator position.
Do you think he needed a formal interview here?
Mike McDaniel?
Yeah, you don't think he and Dan Quinn talked over the last few weeks?
I don't know that. Do you know that?
Yeah, I feel very confident in saying that. But I would also just say it doesn't mean that I think Mike McDaniel, if he didn't get a head coaching job, would have selected here, to your point. But I don't think that he would have not considered it. It's not like he didn't turn it down, if it were there for him to take because it was a terrible opportunity that no one wants to work here now. It's because there are a lot of different reasons guys make decisions. In this case, he's going to end up in L.A. because a lot of people say they wanted to end up in L.A. because his wife is from there. And by the way, it's a pretty good opportunity in LA with Justin Herbert and some of the things that they have there. So, and maybe a quicker,
quarterback.
I'm sorry?
But Kevin, if the league viewed Washington, whether it's Josh Harris, Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, Jane Daniels, as a up-and-coming team where the horizon is bright, people would be coming here. They would. On the radio.
Well, they interviewed a lot of people. I mean, Jonathan Gannon interviewed here. Brian Flores interviewed here. They interviewed a ton of high-level prospects. But remember, the defensive coordinator hire is different than the offensive coordinator hire. The defensive coordinator hire is you're coming into a situation where, love Adam Peters. Of course, we love Dan Quinn. But my God, you've got nothing talent-wise. And Green Bay's got Micah Parsons coming back, and they've got Quay Walker, and they've got all these different players. And that's why Jonathan Gannon, I'm sure, chose, Matt LaFleur and Green Bay. And why Jeff Ulbrich decided, I'm going to stay here because Atlanta is loaded with defensive talent. Did you see how good their defense was at the end of the year? And Ulbrich just coached there. So, Raheem is an interesting situation. I don't know where Raheem's going to end up. That would be the one where you could say if Raheem doesn't get a head coaching job and ends up being a defensive coordinator in a spot where it's not super attractive, let's just say, or he doesn't coach at all this year, you might be able to say, well, they should have waited for Raheem. I'm not a huge Raheem guy personally. So I would say I'd rather go with the up-and-comer that they think can really turn into a big-time defensive coordinator than Raheem. But that's just me. I got to move on. I give you a lot of time, and I appreciate the calls and the interest as always. Paulie, Ricardo, Sean, everybody else on hold, stay there. We'll do this next segment as well. Reactions, overall to the process now being completed. We have an offensive coordinator. We have a defensive coordinator. There are still some possibilities, see what happens with a Brian Johnson offensively, as an example. Is it possible that Daronte Jones has somebody he desperately wants to bring and that person wants to come There's still some, areas of movement possibly in the coaching staff, but we've got both coordinators, and I don't think anybody would have predicted 3 weeks ago we're going to end up with 2 first-time coordinators. That's the way it worked out. What's your reaction? 301-230-0980. And again, Gary Myers, Hall of Fame voter, NFL Hall of Fame voter, will join me at 12 to talk about the Belichick omission as a first ballot Hall of Fame coach. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, happy Wednesday, everybody. Here is what's happening. According to Adam Schefter, the Cleveland Browns have hired former Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken as their next head coach. Monken was originally expected to land the offensive coordinator job under John Harbaugh with the Giants. He now instead makes his return to where he worked as an offensive coordinator under Freddie Kitchens in 2019. Plus, the Jets, they are hiring Brian Duker as their next defensive coordinator. 36-year-old was most recently the passing game coordinator, or the defensive passing game coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. And the Broncos, they fired offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi. Many expect this to set up quarterback coach Davis Webb for promotion if he doesn't land a head coaching gig this cycle. Webb is reportedly a candidate for the open job in Las Vegas. Plus, last night, the Wizards, they earn a home win against the Portland Trailblazers. Alex Sarr with another double-double, his 10th on the year. Wizards hang on 115-111. And the Caps, they fall in a late-night matchup versus the Seattle Kraken. Not all bad for the struggling Caps, though. Alex Ovechkin notches his 919th career NHL tally, but the Caps still fall 5-1. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command all off season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us, and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
NFL Hall of Fame voter, will join us at 12. Let's go to Ricardo in D.C. Ricardo, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Thanks to you and your producer for taking my call. And
Sure.
I'll go real quickly. Daronte Jones, we don't know much about him, but he's paid his dues. He's got a good resume. He's been mentored by some really good defensive coaches. See what's going to happen. David Blau, hopefully he'll be the new Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan, a young coach that everybody's high on. So that's my best hopes there. Real quick question to you, Kevin. Do you realize that you've been pronouncing Jackson Smith in Jigba? You pronounce his name Jackson Smith Njigba?
Njigba. Jackson Smith Njigba.
No. You listen
That's
to
not
all the – no, sir. You listen to every different announcer, reporter on TV.
So tell me how you pronounce it.
Njigba.
Njigba.
Yeah,
Got it. All right. Yeah, I say
right.
Njigba.
That's
I
right.
say Njigba. I get a lot of
Yeah,
stuff
you do.
wrong. I get a lot of that stuff wrong.
Okay. Well,
It's not honestly. I appreciate you bringing it to my attention, and I will try. I'll try to do better on that. What else you got, Ricardo?
Real quickly, also,
Yeah.
I was wondering if Ian is he Ian Weiner, part of the Ian Weiner? Remember the Weiners from Saturday Night Live family?
Yeah.
That's who he reminded me of, man. He's never positive, but I like Ian though. I like Ian, but I just was wondering. All right, thanks for taking my call.
Iron's an acquired taste for many of you, and many of you have not acquired that quite yet. Paulie, go ahead. Paulie's easier to get accustomed to.
Not
Much
an acquired
easier.
taste.
Yeah, he's not an acquired taste. Go ahead, big fella.
Big guy, man. L to the W. How you doing, man?
What's up?
So we finished with the Iron Show? Good.
I know, my fault.
Hey, listen. No, you good, man. You good. Listen, though. I'm good with this, man. Because the guys that Iron is talking about, I don't think this has nothing to do with coaches don't want to come here because we on a downtrodden or Quinn's on a hot seat. I think it's more of Quinn wants coaches that's going to relate to these players. These are young coaches. They're upcoming coaches. The guys that we talking about, Mike McDaniels and Raheem Morris, these guys are head coaches, man. They've been in the league for a while as head coaches, and that's what they're looking for. He's not looking for coaches that are going to bail after a year. We went through that with Kingsbury. And also he's looking for some energy. You know what I mean? If you look at the practices, they jumping around, they dancing, not dancing around, but they jumping around, they moving from one spot to the next. Like, he wants some guys with some pep in the step, some energy, and coaches that the players can relate to. And it's nothing like young, fresh minds as far as, how he's looking as a coach. He's a delegate. Like you said, he doesn't want to be a hands-on coach. He wants to delegate his responsibilities to these positions. So basically, these guys are head coaches of their position, and he's looking for something different. And there's nothing wrong with that, man. Just because we're not doing what everybody else seems to be doing doesn't mean it ain't the right thing to do.
Well, a lot of teams are doing this stuff. I mean, Dallas hired Christian Parker, position coach to be their DC. A lot of teams are doing it this way. I think, one of the things, and I haven't emphasized it today as much as I emphasized it yesterday, and I know this is a big part of the hiring of Daronte Jones or anybody else that they were thinking about. Dan Quinn came in here with Joe Witt Jr. preaching, we're going to turn people over. And they didn't do it in year one, and they didn't do it in year two. And it's the biggest area of disappointment for Quinn about his first 2 years defensively.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with this fan base, man. Like, what happened to us this year happens to every team in the league, good or bad. It happens, man. But because we went through 30 previous years of all-time dysfunctional organizational BS, as soon as we have one little blip on the screen, blip on the map, or whatever you want to, blip in the matrix, everybody's losing their mind. And what you always say, PTSD.
Yeah.
That's all. People just need to relax, man. Listen, he got the play. He got the coaches in here that he wanted to get in here. You know what I mean? He said, look, he's turned that culture around. You can see at the end of the year,
No doubt.
regardless of how the season went, these players were still going full speed and they still was playing. You know what I mean? There was no backfighting. You didn't hear, players, the offense talking
Still
about
haven't.
the defense or the defense
Still
talking
haven't.
about the offense. None of that. So the culture has changed. That's the main thing. So now Adam Peters just need to get some players in here, and he's going to make mistakes. He's going to hit, and he's going to miss.
Of course.
Things happen. Let's just not make the same mistake twice. That's it, man.
Yep.
Moving
Yeah,
forward,
and here's the thing with Daronte Jones. I mean, you got this. My thing on takeaways. With that said, you got to have players that are near the ball to take the ball away. Hopefully that'll happen. But the one thing is that he hired somebody who hadn't done it before, who had a long resume in the league, in Joe Witt Jr., and this does, for some, reek of that. The difference is he's never coached with Quinn before, and he just came from an absolutely different style of football defensively. So I'm looking forward to it as well. Per usual, Paulie, a very commonsensical call, especially as it relates to the way people are feeling not even 12 months later after they felt completely the opposite, after a season that was destructed by something that was out of their control. Let me get one more call in here. Sean in Woodbridge has been on hold. Thanks, Sean. Go ahead.
Kevin, how you doing, man?
Good, Sean.
All right. This is the thing. Man, this is exciting. I love this. This is really exciting. The thing is starting with Adam Peters. I love what he did. He looked Kingsbury in the eye and told him, look, man, I mean, we think that it was some things, being done from the standpoint of, just Jaden. We just think he was running them a little bit too much. We just asking you, could you chill out? Oh, you know how he gets. It's like, well, look, okay, no problem. You go ahead and look, man. You go ahead and look for a head coaching job. We fine with that. But while you're doing that, we got to find your replacement. I love it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, let me just tell you, it wasn't Adam Peters. I mean, I'm not saying Adam Peters didn't feel that way, but Quinn felt that way too, and Quinn drove that decision. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say the team. The team.
Yep.
Okay, I'll say the team. Now, this is the thing. I seriously think when Kingsbury came in, really, to be honest with you, they had Blau on their radar beforehand. I'm telling you, the thing
no
is,
doubt.
They had Blau on the radar. Now, as far as the defensive coordinator situation is concerned, I think it was one or two people they really wanted. That's why they waited a little longer. But they had their secondary situation. This is going to be fine. They're young guys and they got energy. I mean, people need to calm the hell down. Everything's going to be fine.
I'm looking forward to this, Sean. I got to go. I'm up against a hard break, and I got a guest. I appreciate the call. I'm looking forward to – I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to both, really. And it's going to be one of those things, quite honestly. You're going to have to exercise a little bit of patience. They haven't done it before, and I don't know how much patience everybody has. We'll see. That's September and October conversation. Up next, Gary Myers has been a Hall of Fame voter for a while. He will join me to talk about the Bill Belichick snub as a first ballot Hall of Fame selection. Joining me right now is Gary Myers. Gary Myers, a longtime NFL reporter and columnist, covered the NFC East in its glory years with the Dallas Morning News and the New York Daily News. He's very familiar with the Redskins teams of the 80s and the matchups with the Cowboys and the Giants and the Eagles. He's a best-selling author. His newest book is Brady versus Manning. And the question that it answers is, was it
actually Brady versus Belichick?
What did I say?
Manning. That's
oh, my
okay.
fault. My fault. Well, that is, you know what? That's your next book. That's your next book. Was it Brady or
I did that one
Belichick?
10
My
years
fault.
ago.
Yeah. Was it Brady or Belichick? The greatest unanswered question in NFL history. Gary is with me right now.
No.
My fault on that. So you are, look, you've been one of the all-time, for those of us of a certain age and remembering, that era, you were a big part of it. And then, you had the book about, Parcells and the former Giants and some of the tragedy around some of their stories off of that great 86 team. Belichick was a part of it, obviously, as the defensive coordinator. You're so intimately familiar with the Giants and with Belichick. So I'll just start with the obvious. Why do you think Belichick didn't get 40 votes to become a first ballot Hall of Famer when it seems so obvious?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's fairly obvious that he had the credentials to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and that although it's a secret ballot, and I don't know who voted against him, I would have to think that those who had an objection were, relying on their feelings that Spygate eliminates him from first ballot consideration, and maybe they'll never vote for him. That they think he cheated and doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I was working for the Daily News here at the time of that, and I was as critical of Bill as anybody was. I thought it was horrible what he did, but he was punished for it, and I think he was embarrassed at being caught. I don't think he really even feels what he did was wrong. But all these years later, it's really hard to keep a guy out who went to 9 Super Bowls as a head coach and won 6. He went to 3 as an assistant and won 2, and got to 6 Super Bowls after Spygate. So in and of itself, that's a Hall of Fame career if you want to eliminate everything he did before that. So it was to me, it was a no-brainer. I didn't even think twice about whether I was going to vote for him or not.
The way you said that, I think of Barry Bonds. Many people think Barry Bonds was a Hall of Fame, had a Hall of Fame career before steroids. But it's not apples to apples because there's no, morality clause in NFL Hall of Fame voting. So, but you do think that that's what it is, more so than personal feelings that Bill was difficult with media, that kind of thing. You think it comes down to Spygate, Deflategate?
Well, not even Deflategate. I think it was Spygate. I don't think that Bill, whatever was going on with the footballs, if there was something going on with the footballs, because I still think it was a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, it was.
I think actually it was one of Bill's finer moments. He had a press conference the day before they went to the Super Bowl that year.
Common gas law.
He explained the common gas law.
Yeah.
But he also quoted Mona Lisa Vito from My Cousin Vinny,
yeah,
which I think was Belichick's finest moment ever at a press conference.
I forget what he said. The line from My Cousin Vinny. What did he say? Do you remember it specifically?
It was about.
Was it a Pesci line?
I'm not the Mona Lisa Vito of something or other.
Right. Because it
really
it wasn't his thing to explain even a 7th grade science experiment, which basically it was. Like I'm now forgetting the guy that did the report, the long many-page report on Deflategate, but it was like a 7th grader could have figured out why the ball actually deflated and the temperatures that it deflated in.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and I did a lot of work on this story. I know sometimes in the winter, living in the Northeast, that when I go out to my car, if I've been in a restaurant for a while or if I park it on the street, that if it's really cold out, the tire pressure light will come on because tires do lose pressure in the really cold weather. Well, that day in New England, it was cold and it was rainy, and the balls didn't measure correctly at halftime. But they never had any proof that anybody monkeyed around with the football.
Right.
And I think it took a while for it to come out that people really were, the ideal gas law and the PSIs and all that stuff, that it very well could have been a result of the cold weather. So I thought that was a real witch hunt, and it was kind of a make-up call that a lot of the NFL owners felt that Belichick got off lightly in Spygate.
Gary, what's been your reaction to the Twitter, social media, and beyond that, just attacks on the 11 people, because there were 11, if it was truly 39 and they didn't get to 40, 11 people that didn't vote for Belichick. And let me just, mention again, if I didn't already, you tweeted out, "I believe in transparency and had no issue revealing I voted for Belichick." But, now there's a search for the 11 that didn't. What's your reaction to that?
Well, the first thing I want to tell you is that we don't know that it's only 11. We know it's at least 11.
That's true.
It could be 12. It could be 13. I'd be surprised if it was more than that. But I honestly don't know because they don't tell us. And when I heard this news about Belichick, I was floored. So, I mean, it's a secret ballot, and one of the reasons that I think, let me say this, if I was still writing for the New York Daily News and I voted against Belichick, I would have no problem writing a column explaining my vote. Today, if I voted against Belichick, which I didn't, but if I did, I don't know that I would put it on Twitter and subject myself to abuse because that's what it would be. Why would you do that to yourself? In the interest of transparency, you can let all these nut jobs on Twitter who've got nothing better to do, make threats and call you names and all kinds. Why would you do that? I even got negative stuff putting out that I voted for him, but people are saying, why won't I name the people who voted against him? And basically call me a liar when I tell them I don't know. And I don't know. So the environment that we're living in today has given everybody license to say whatever they want because they hide behind their Twitter avatar and they say things there that they would never say to your face. And I might, if I had voted against them and seen what the reaction is, I probably wouldn't fess up and say it. Because why would I do that to myself? In whose interest would I be doing that? All these people out there who I don't know, telling them I voted against them so they can criticize me? Why would I do that? Now, if the fact that I voted for him, I got some criticism also from people who think, how can you vote for him? He cheated. I generally reveal my entire ballot.
Do you think it should be transparent? Do you think that votes should be public?
I do. Because I think, and friends of mine in the media have said this to me in the last couple of hours. Like, if we're asking players and coaches to be accountable for their actions on and off the field, why shouldn't we hold ourselves to the same standard? But the fact that it's not part of the Hall of Fame bylaws that you have to reveal your vote, I'm not passing judgment on anybody who doesn't choose to be transparent. It's a personal decision. And the fact that I choose to reveal it is a personal decision. And
what's the easiest Hall of Fame vote you've ever made? Was it Belichick?
Yeah, I mean, to me that was pretty easy. But I mean, there's been some easy ones. Peyton Manning was pretty easy. Jerry Rice was pretty easy.
Yeah. Tom Brady will be pretty easy.
I don't know if I was on the committee in Jerry Rice. Randy Moss to me was easy. I'm trying to remember whether Emmitt Smith I was on the committee yet. I can't remember. I mean, there are certain guys that all they really have to do, the presenter just needs to stand up, say their name, and sit down.
Yeah.
Those are rare.
Yeah.
That there's zero discussion.
I've
And what
heard
I'm really curious about now is what happens with Brady in 2 years. I mean, you talk about an absolute no-brainer. That's Tom Brady. But based on what just happened to Belichick, are people now going to say, well, he benefited from Spygate, even though Tom says he never benefited from that. And they're going to say, well, he was deflating footballs. And Thomas said he was neither involved in that or had any awareness of it. But there are good people who don't believe him. So is he going to be one of those guys that whoever is presenting him just sits down, says his name, stands up, says his name, and sits down? Or are they going to feel compelled to make a presentation in case somebody attacks him?
Right.
I don't know.
Of the 5, senior finalists, and then the other category owner coaches, Ken Anderson, Roger Craig, L.C. Greenwood, Robert Kraft, and Bill Belichick. Just for those of you who don't know how it works, that's not the current player list. That's separate. This is
right.
This is for kind of the others, coaches, owners, and seniors, which is what Jake was on. Joe Jacoby was on the senior, got to the senior semifinalist list and didn't make it to this the final list, which we all here in Washington think he deserves it, and I think I've talked to you about it before. But anyway, you're only allowed, correct me if I'm wrong, to vote a maximum of 3 of those guys. Do you think there's any chance somebody said, look, Belichick's getting in, I might as well take my vote? And I've always thought that Anderson, Craig, and Greenwood are Hall of Famers, and I don't want to be the 1 out of 50 that doesn't vote for him, but it's a slam dunk. Do you think that that's a possibility?
You mean to hold off voting for Belichick to vote for one of the other guys because Belichick's in another year?
Yes. Well, thinking that Belichick would get in anyway this year.
I guess that's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't discuss this with anybody after our meeting, so I don't know what anybody's thought process was, voting for him or against him. I heard Sal Palantonio say on TV this morning that maybe people voted against him to get somebody else in who this might be a one-shot deal for them, and that Belichick could just get in next year. Again, I don't know if Sal knows that or he was just kind of trying to explain what might have happened.
Let me just ask you real quickly. Did you vote for Ken Anderson?
No, I did not. I voted for in that group of 5, I voted for Belichick, Kraft, and Roger Craig. You can only vote for
Roger
3.
Craig. I've always thought that.
And I also feel I just feel that Phil Simms should be in the Hall of Fame before Ken Anderson, and that's and Ken Anderson had great numbers and everything, but he didn't really win anything. I mean, do you have anything else? Because I got to run to do something else.
Oh, I didn't realize you had to run to. I was going to ask you real quickly about the book. So was it more Brady or Belichick?
I said it was Brady, 63% to 37%, and a lot of people think it was more lopsided than that. I don't happen to agree with that. And if I can just mention the other book that I wrote that people in Washington might be interested in, it's called Once a Giant. It was about the '86 Giants championship team, and it's about their life after football. And there's a lot about the former Redskins team in the book, and it's about the Giants and how they're doing 40 years later. But anybody who's interested in that period of time and how these players were impacted by their life in football,
it's an excellent book.
It can be just as true of the Washington players as the Giant players. They all went through the same stuff.
Last one. I know you got to run. Mm-hmm. Is Belichick the greatest coach of all time? Resume-wise, yes. But if you had one coach to pick for one season, who would it be?
Bill Parcells.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate the time. Hope you're well.
Okay, Jeff. Take care. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Gary Myers, everybody. I'm sure he is busy today as a former Hall of Fame voter. I'm glad he made time for us. The one thing in him saying Phil Simms, I always think about Phil Simms and Joe Theismann's resumes being pretty similar. Now, he didn't say he thinks Phil Simms should be in the Hall of Fame. He thinks Phil Simms should be in the Hall of Fame in front of Ken Anderson. But Joe Theismann, also won the same number of Super Bowls that Phil Simms won. Phil Simms was the starter on the 90 team, but Jeff Hostetler came in sort of down the stretch and took him through the postseason. So technically, Simms has 2 rings. Theismann has 1, but Theismann has an MVP, something that Phil Simms does not have. I personally, that Phil Simms Theismann debate, I don't think, and I love Joe dearly, I don't think either one of them are Hall of Famers. Personally, I think they were great players, but I don't know that they had. I mean, I'm looking up Phil Simms right now. He had 2 Pro Bowl appearances, not 1 AP, first team. Joe Theismann was an MVP, and Joe Theismann had as much playoff success as Simms did. Theismann went to 2 Super Bowls as the starting quarterback for the entire season and won one of them. I think their cases are very similar, and I think I'd probably put Joe's case slightly above Phil Simms's case. Ken Anderson's always been an interesting one, and I wonder if he'll get in. I think Roger Craig probably has a better case, but Anderson had some years that were just sick in the 70s and early 80s for a high-flying Cincinnati team that actually got to a Super Bowl with Anderson, but they lost to Montana, and Montana's first Super Bowl win. But there you go. Hall of Fame voter Gary Myers. He voted for him, doesn't understand, was floored to find out that they were not, and thinks that the voting should be transparent in the future. I think a lot of NFL fans feel that way. I'll just say what I said earlier in the show. Even looking for a contrarian view, which is always on my mind, that's one of those where the box should have come checked already almost. If you don't know to vote for Bill Belichick, if he's on the ballot and he's not in the Hall of Fame already, and he's presented to you on a list, by the way, that includes Ken Anderson, Roger Craig, L.C. Greenwood, and Robert Kraft, it's hard to really take that voter seriously in the future. There's no morality clauses in the NFL. There are people with some horrendous backgrounds that are in the Hall of Fame. Bill Belichick supposedly did something in cheating with Spygate and got penalized and got punished for it, and the organization got punished for it. But that everybody was trying to do back then. He just did it better than anybody else. But as Gary said, he won a lot of those Super Bowls long after Spygate. With that said, he didn't win any of them without Brady. And his book, Brady versus Belichick, he gives Brady more of the credit. But how will they treat Brady when he's eligible? Is that next year? I think it's next year. How will they treat Brady when he's eligible? Are they going to hold? I'll tell you what, the backlash for the 11 plus that didn't vote for Belichick, I bet you they vote for Brady first ballot. Because really, in our lifetime, in terms of, or I shouldn't say in our lifetime, because guys like Jerry Rice were obvious first ballot. The greatest players that ever played at a position. Jerry Rice, I've said this so many times about Jerry Rice, there isn't a position in football that doesn't have a debate about who the greatest there ever was who played that position, except for one position, and that's wide receiver. There is nobody that debates anybody with Jerry Rice. You don't debate Randy Moss with Jerry Rice, T.O. with Jerry Rice, Lance Allworth with Jerry Rice. You don't debate any of those people. Jerry Rice is the only player in the history of the game that hands down, no one disagrees, was the greatest at his position. Every other position, there's a debate. Even at running back, where people of a certain age will say, Jim Brown, count 5 spaces until you get to number 2. And that would probably be the second closest to Rice. But there are people that will say Walter Payton, people who will say Emmitt Smith, people who will say Barry Sanders, etc. But no one disputes Jerry Rice. This is almost the equivalent of Jerry Rice not being a first ballot Hall of Famer. Crazy that it didn't happen. We're going to do some NFL buy and sell. Max and I are next. And we are going to, you know what? Let's take some Belichick calls before we do that. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. My view, simply put, is if you didn't vote for Bill Belichick, all due respect, no matter what your reasons are, you honestly shouldn't be able to vote for a Hall of Fame player or coach again. And I don't even consider Belichick to be the guy that I would select for one season. I would select Shula. Gary Myers said Parcells. He, New York guy, covered those Giant teams. And look, Gibbs would be near the top of my list on this one. I'm not cutting Joe out. I would certainly consider Joe. But Belichick's 9 Super Bowl appearances, 6 as a winning Super Bowl coach, and then certainly as a defensive coordinator where he won 2 more. It's the easiest vote in the history of coaches in the league. 301-230-0980. We'll take coach calls. Would you have voted for Bill Belichick? Can you understand 11 people at least that didn't? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, Bill Belichick, not a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think it's a joke. I'd love to take the contrarian view. There just isn't one with this one. Spygate, he won so much after Spygate, and everybody else was trying to Spygate as well. They just didn't do it as well as he did. They were punished for it, and there's no morality clauses in the NFL Hall of Fame voting. This isn't keeping Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds out for steroids or steroid suspicion or any of the guys. That's not part of the Hall of Fame voter criteria. It is all about the resume. And the resume says the greatest coach in the history of the game, not close. Been to 9, won 6. I don't know how that box isn't the first thing that's checked if you are a legitimate, serious Hall of Fame voter. Again, it's interesting because I asked Gary Myers, you have one coach for one season. Who would you take? He said Parcells. I said, and I had this as part of the conversation to open the show, I actually think I would take Shula before Belichick. But it doesn't matter. Resume-wise, the actual numbers are so far in excess of the next guy on the list in terms of Super Bowl appearances and Super Bowl wins. It's a no-brainer. What was your reaction? 301-230-0980. Let's start with Mike in Bowie. Mike, go ahead. You there? Let's try Mike in Reston, Max. You want to do that?
Any Mikes?
Hello?
Mike's going
We'll take
once.
any Mike. Go ahead, Mike in
Yo,
Reston.
what's going on, Kevin?
How are you, Mike?
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I was shocked when I heard about the Belichick stuff, but like I said, he's one of the greatest of all time as far as coaching. I would probably say he either pissed off a lot of people and they had resentment toward him because of his cockiness, but that's part of the game. The one thing I do like to say though, like a couple of things I probably would say that probably did hurt him is the fact that, his last couple of years in New England was disastrous. And on top of that, for him to jump to college and it was a total debacle in Carolina, I think those things may have some existence to him not getting selected. But yeah, I was shocked, and just like everybody else, the man should be in the Hall of Fame. But on another note, with the Joe Jacoby thing, I hate to say it, man, but I think Joe Jacoby's going to be like Pete Rose. And what I mean when I say that is the fact that he might have to die before he gets into the Hall of Fame, which is sad.
Yeah,
But, I just don't like how
that would obviously be sad, and I hope Jake's doing well and he's healthy, and we don't want that to happen. But the Pete Rose comparison is not apt. Obviously, it's
Yeah, I don't want it to happen, but that's what it seems like it's trending. But hopefully he gets in next year. But yeah, Belichick needs to be in the Hall of Fame, man. Thanks for taking my call.
Well, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. It just would appear he's not going to be in first ballot, which is a joke. Pete Rose. Bet on baseball, the cardinal rule, you can't bet on baseball. And he bet on it. And also, by the way, player comparison to Jake, as much as we love Jake, Pete Rose is one of the greatest hitters in the history of the game. Let's go to Skip in DC. Skip, go ahead.
Kevin, okay, first of all, there's no set criteria. So you mentioned criteria, but there is none.
Yeah, it's right. It's totally subjective.
Right. So cheating.
But there's no morality clause. There's nothing that says you have to consider this.
There's no criteria.
Yeah.
People can factor in cheating.
Sure.
And the video was destroyed, which was a travesty. But the people have said that video showed, all the plays that were being called on offense and defense. That is a huge advantage in a game if you have access to the plays that another team is calling. So you can say that other teams did it, but there is actual proof that Belichick did it.
And they were punished for it.
Sure. But now it's like you said, there's no criteria. So people can judge and say, hey, what I've heard, what the reports say is, we're going to not put him in the first year because he cheated. That to me is very reasonable.
To me, it's
in sports, cheating in sports is a big deal. Fair play in sports is a big deal to a lot of people.
Yes.
And you can't really overlook that. I know when you've grown up, you've always been told, hey, you play the game fairly. Cheating, especially getting people's plays in advance of a game, that's a huge advantage, especially in football. So come on. I mean, you can't just dismiss that and say, oh, well, that shouldn't be considered at all. Like, especially when there's
he
no
won
criteria.
he won 4 of them after Spygate with no ability.
Hey, look,
so
he's
his resume
qualified
post
to be in the
Spygate
Hall of
speaks to
Fame.
that. If you wanna say I'm gonna hold him accountable for Spygate beyond what the league did in Hall of Fame voting, it is subjective. You can do that. I think it's silly. I think there's so much gamesmanship in the history of this game and so much cheating we don't even know about. I read you what Jimmy Johnson, talked about this morning. I think one of the really very interesting things about the reaction to this, because Belichick, I think a lot of fans, Skip, believe, was one of these guys that people were jealous of in the league, or people perhaps were pissed off that, he got away with, Spygate or Deflategate or whatever. The number of players and former coaches coming out in a loud way last night and this morning to say this is one of the greatest wrongs in the history of the Hall of Fame, I find interesting. I mean, Jimmy Johnson has gone off. I'll just read the tweet if you didn't hear me read it earlier. If they are using the excuse of Spygate, that's ridiculous. Many teams, including ourselves, tried it. Howard Mudd at Kansas City, who later coached for Bill Polian and Tony Dungy, gave us the idea. He was the best. We didn't get anything and stopped, but many teams gave it a try. This was a bigger deal outside of the league, clearly, given the reaction, than it was inside the league. I find that to be interesting. You're entitled to your opinion, and it sounds like the fact that he cheated, got caught, was punished for it. Would you vote for him the second go round?
Of course. They just said 1 year. Let's just give him 1 year for the cheating, so he didn't get away with it.
That's not what your subjectivity is supposed to be about. Your subjectivity is based on the resume of the candidate.
Which he's qualified. He's totally qualified. Nobody's disputing
Well, beyond
that.
qualified. He's the most qualified in the history of coaches in the NFL.
I agree. Even though I would like Vince Lombardi if you just give me one, for one coach.
Maybe. Yeah, not a bad choice. Thanks, Skip, as always. Appreciate it. Let's go to G. G, go ahead. Where you been?
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad that I'm good, man.
Is Jordan Smith going to be the best high school player to ever come out of this area?
No, that's too tough to say, because when you're talking about Kevin Durant, Mike Beasley, Walt Williams,
Elgin Baylor.
Come on. Yeah, Elgin Baylor, Rabbit, God rest his soul, Dave Bing. Man, we can go. Sheehan, I thought you wanted me to be coachable.
Well, I've been thinking about this because I had somebody who I respect recently tell me after they beat Gonzaga the other night, somebody said, and he scored 33, I think, a guy who's watched a lot of high school basketball, coached a lot of youth basketball in the area, said, you know what? I've arrived at this conclusion. Jordan Smith's the greatest player and will be the greatest player to have ever played high school basketball in this area. And I said, that's really, out there.
It ain't really jumping off the limb, because he's the hottest new thing right now. And, we don't stop. We just reload. Every year it's a different player.
Is he going to art? Where's he going?
I'm not sure. They're keeping that tucked real good, but he is Russell Westbrook 2.0. He's so exciting.
His motor.
He's so exciting to watch. His motor, he rebounds the basketball. I watched him have 9 rebounds and 4 blocks in the championship game 2 years ago as a sophomore.
Yeah.
And, his motor is vicious. And the kid out McNamara, Caden Samuels, lefty, 6'6", he scores the basketball as easy as Carmelo did. But, man, I'm glad the Hall of Fame did this, because it shows the masses how to discredit the Hall of Fame of the NFL. Man, they are so terrible and spiteful. Like you said, he's overqualified. Like, he's the most qualified there ever could be. And you talk that last caller, you said we want to play the game fair. Yeah, but it's called scouting. And they said, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So, man, nah, man. They ain't go Nancy Kerrigan, the opponent. And like you said, they won 4 after Spygate. They lost to the Giants with Eli before Spygate. What was that? To a 9-7 team in the Super Bowl. So, nah, Belichick should have been first ballot, no-brainer. On my list of coaches, he's my 5th rank because I got Joe Gibbs ranked ahead of him. You know, in my all-time, if I needed one coach for one season, I'm picking the Tuna because the Tuna is at the top of my list for NFL coaches that I've ever seen.
Well, that's what Gary Myers said. He'd pick Parcells too.
But Sheehan,
what?
But Sheehan, you said it's not debatable about Jerry Rice. I always debate it. Randy Moss is the best wide receiver I've ever seen in my life. He rolls out the bed on a bad day. Just put your hand up. 6'5", run like a deer. That's my GOAT. Pause.
That's fine, but I think really what I'm saying is in most the position that gets rarely debated by you've debated it, but it really doesn't get debated among NFL fans, among NFL longtime pundits, writers, etc. Jerry Rice is easily the greatest receiver, overwhelmingly any kind of rankings that you'll ever see, and it's not close. It's.
So would you say he's ranked higher on the wide receiver standard by the masses more than Lawrence Taylor is in the linebacker status?
I mean, Jim Brown's the one that anybody, 65 and older would say, sorry, but Jim Brown's not only the greatest running back that ever played the game, he's the greatest football player that ever played the game. For me, I you know what? It's easy in terms of the greatest football player of my lifetime, and I don't know if you agree with me, but Lawrence Taylor's the greatest football player of my lifetime. Not best linebacker, best football player. But I guess there are a lot of, linebackers in general, maybe not pure outside linebackers, but, a lot of people would say Butkus or Nitschke. Like, there's a lot of guys that they would put in the linebacker conversation.
We could debate it all day, but I'm with you exactly on this point. Belichick's name should have came with the check mark already in it because the eye test and the stats prove it. And with my eye test, one of my all-time greatest coaches that I ever seen, because I seen how he ran and managed the team and how they was a well-oiled machine, never won a Super Bowl. Marv Levy, man. So if Belichick can't get in on the first ballot, it's crazy. I thought it was crazy they made Terrell Owens wait the extra ballot. Because, man, they just some spiteful haters, Sheehan.
They did that with T.O. Let me just say, you're right about LT. There's no debating it. There's no better outside linebacker in the history of the game. If you want to put Butkus in there as an overall linebacker conversation, that's fine, but there's no better outside linebacker in the history of the game than LT, period. And it's not debated much by anybody.
Yeah, 100%. And heard you talking about A.J. DeBonsa. He is really pro-ready, does everything, can't nobody check him. He's not a foul line merchant because they foul him because they really can't guard him at all. But you know who I'm in love with in this college basketball season? Darius A. Cuff Jr. out Arkansas. If you in doubt ever, bet on a Coach Calipari guard.
Talk to you later. Appreciate it. Let's go to Robert in Annapolis. Robert, go ahead.
Well, good morning. This is just an example of personal pettiness. That's all this is, and that's the problem with the whole system. We love the NFL, but it has its faults, and we've talked about different things, fumbling the ball through the end zone and being awarded to the defensive team and a variety of things. What's a catch, all that, and just this whole voting process. My best coach of all time, though, is Vince Lombardi, but Belichick is certainly the most successful. And as far as best football player, NFL player of all time, got to be Tom Brady. I mean, come on, man. He did more for New England.
Yeah, but there's always going to be a quarterback debate. There's always going to be a quarterback debate.
Kevin, he won 7 Super Bowls.
I understand it, and he's the greatest on my list. He's the greatest on my list, but there are a lot of people that would say he wasn't the most gifted. He wasn't the most talented.
We're not talking about gifts.
I know.
About
I'm just saying that there's more of a debate about the greatest quarterback than there is the greatest wide receiver. And I would throw in what G mentioned. I can't believe that I didn't say it, but outside linebacker, it's LT, and there's really not a debate. Now, middle linebacker, Butkus and Ray Lewis would be in that conversation, certainly, so it's more debatable, I think, on that one. But Jerry Rice overwhelmingly has never really been pushed in the conversation of the greatest wide receiver of all time.
May I make a quick comment on the Commanders coordinator thing? One of the things that I thought applicable candidates would view is coming here, they would get an in. That job, the head coach job, may open up in a year or two. And if they were already in here, then they would have made a connection with the ownership group. So I thought they would get.
Wait, say that again. I didn't follow that. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. With the Commanders coordinator search, now I know that they had their eyes set on Blau, so on and so forth, but the defensive coordinator. But I thought if I was a coordinator somewhere else and I'm viewing a future job, regardless of the talent on the team, I might go there, that is to Washington, because then I am in the building and I can make a connection with the ownership group should they decide to move on from Quinn in a year or two. I'm just thinking that sets them up for the opportunity to make a connection. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but if you're talking on the defensive side of the ball, are the results going to be so dramatically different than they've been in the first 2 years that you're going to look attractive to the owner to replace the head coach?
I don't know what the success would be because of the lack of talent. But again, if you're establishing a relationship with the ownership instead of in a year or two just coming in cold for an interview.
I think the one that certainly would have been intriguing from that standpoint. And I'm not suggesting that Quinn didn't go in this direction because he feared that this guy would have taken his job after maybe a so-so year, but Mike McDaniel would have been that guy. Had he been the offensive coordinator, had they kicked ass offensively next year, had they been bad again on defense next year, and they went 9-8 and lost a wild card game, and Mike McDaniel's going to get a head coaching job somewhere else if you don't elevate him to your head coaching job. That's the only thing, somebody like that.
I was thinking Flores because he has issues, and I thought that he could come in and show them, what he actually is. And I thought that and he really wants a head coach job, and there's some teams that aren't going to hire him. Yeah. So I thought that would be his move. But there you go. That's all.
Yeah, the Flores thing is pretty complicated, I think, league-wide, for sure. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it. We'll finish up with a little NFL buy and sell after this. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
All right, happy Wednesday, everybody. Here is what's happening. According to Adam Schefter, the Cleveland Browns have hired former Ravens OC Todd Monken as their next head coach. Monken was originally expected to land the offensive coordinator job under John Harbaugh with the Giants. He now instead makes a return where he worked as an offensive coordinator under Freddie Kitchens in 2019. Little roadblock for the Browns, though, after the Browns informed defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz this morning that they were passing over him to hire Todd Monken as their head coach. Schwartz was visibly upset, according to Tom Pelissero, and said his goodbyes in the building. He told other coaches that he is not coming back, sources tell, again, Tom Pelissero. So we'll see how that goes in the coming weeks. The Jets have hired Brian Duker as their next defensive coordinator. 36-year-old was most recently the passing game coordinator for the Miami Dolphins on the defensive front. And last night, the Wizards, they earn a home win against the Portland Trailblazers. Alex Sarr with another double-double, his 10th on the year. Wizards hang on 115-111. And the Caps, they fall in a late-night matchup versus the Seattle Kraken. Not all bad for the struggling squad, though. Alex Ovechkin notches his 919th career NHL tally in a loss where the Caps fall 5-1. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command all off season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
All right. Quick buys and sells. I'll go first on the buy side. First of all, let me just mention there's a report from Tom Pelissaro that Jim Schwartz, now that they've hired Todd Monken to be the head coach in Cleveland, that he wants out. Now, he is under contract in 2026 in Cleveland, but he wants out. Now, if they let him out to become a defensive coordinator somewhere else, that was one that I would have been interested in for sure. Schwartz, grew up in kind of Baltimore, Annapolis, went to Georgetown, interviewed for the Skins head coaching job before they hired Zorn, all the way back in 2008 when Gibbs retired. He's had a lot of talent everywhere he's been recently. There's definitely no doubt about that, whether it was Cleveland, currently Tennessee before that, the Eagles before that, but he's always been one hell of a coach. All right. My buy is this: Cliff Kingsbury to Baltimore as the OC. I know that Davis Webb is a possibility. He could also become a head coach. But I think Kingsbury to Baltimore makes a lot of sense from a head coaching standpoint. Jesse Minter is the head coach. Kingsbury is the offensive coordinator. It's his style of offense that Lamar would thrive in. That's my buy. What are you buying?
Kevin, it's so funny that I'm really glad that you and I don't discuss these and we just kind of write them down whenever and do it, because I also am buying Cliff Kingsbury to Baltimore. Now, I mentioned that.
I thought you were going to give me a Giants offensive coordinator.
This is my thing. I could see Cliff going to Baltimore to work with Lamar and unlock him in all those ways. I thought maybe Denver, but I'm kind of going back on that because I think Sean Payton wants a little bit more control over the offense, which led me to the New York Giants. So I could see Cliff getting the job in either one of those spots. I do think that there are some similarities, between, Jackson Dart and Lamar Jackson and how they want to run that offense up there in New York. So I could definitely see Cliff staying in the NFC East, or at least staying in this, what do we call it? The DC New York corridor.
Sure. DC to New York corridor. Sure. It's usually kind of referred to as DC to Boston, I-95 corridor.
Sure.
But whatever you want to do, however you want to do it.
Point is, I don't think Cliff's moving that far this offseason.
Got it. So my sell, I've thought a lot about this because I love this player, and I think this player is going to be sought after big time in free agency. But there's a reason that I would hesitate a lot. I think Jalen Phillips made himself some money as an unrestricted free agent after being traded by the Dolphins to Philadelphia. And he's the kind of, edge rusher that Washington might desire. He's also just 26 years old. He's that 6'5", 260-pound, long-armed, great feel for the game. Jalen Phillips is a flat-out baller. But his history in this league is injuries, injuries, injuries. And after this past season, I don't want to spend big money on Jalen Phillips only to have him go down in week 2, against the Giants. Or the Eagles. I love the player, but I'm selling Washington because I think there will be a lot of desire in Jalen Phillips as a player. I do. He is what a team like Washington needs. They need more than just Jalen Phillips, but a Jalen Phillips, David Bailey combination in free agency, I think would be very, very exciting. But he has just spent his career in the blue tent and on stretchers. So I'm looking at it right now. All right. So this year he played 17 games, 2024, 4 games, 2023, 8 games. He basically spent years 3 and years 4 injured big time. And they weren't, minimal injuries. I mean, he had a torn Achilles. Then it was, I think, I'm trying to think if we broke his leg or he did an ACL. Hold on. I should have looked this up before. I just know he's been injured a lot. 2024, the Dolphins picked up the 5th year on him. and he was placed on the active physically unable to perform list due to a torn Achilles. And then he suffered a knee injury as well. So, yeah, I think you got to hesitate on Jalen Phillips because of that. What's your sell quickly?
My sell quickly, I just don't believe Joe Brady is going to do anything as the Bills head coach up in Buffalo. I just don't like the move. It feels lateral to me. I don't know that he's fully prepared to take on that job, but hey, Josh Allen wanted Joe Brady. You got Joe Brady.
Chris Russell next.